This was the coolest gate design that I have ever built, and the reason it's so cool is because it's unique. Most of my customers don't want some exotic design on their gate, they just want functionality, and as a result, most of the gates I build, yes, they're functional, but they're just not that unique. However, in this case, I am the customer, so I get to design this gate exactly how I want it. I'm not used to being the customer. I'm used to the customer just telling me what they want and I build it. But in this case, it is so cool because I can do this exactly how I want it. And I'm not forking out a bunch of money for a project because the only money I spend here is the material, which I already have. And the only other cost is the powder coat, which might be a couple $100. I just planted a fruit orchard on my property, which is great. I love fruit, but the only problem is I'm going to need a fence around this because if I don't put a fence up, the deer are going to eat my fruit. And of course, anytime you put a fence up, then you're going to need a gate. And that's where this gate comes in. I could have just bought a standard galvanized Home Depot gate and called it good. However, since I do metal fabrication for a living, I might as well at least build something that looks cool. Do you notice anything different about the welder I'm using? Yes, normally in the shop I use a MIG welder, but in this case I'm using a stick welder. And not just any stick welder. I bought the cheapest welder on Amazon just to test it out. The first thing to do was to get this main frame tacked together. And when I'm welding these miter corners, I always square up each corner. And after I square them up individually, then I take a tape measure and measure the diagonals on each of these to make sure that they're the same. And then another thing that's really important is to make sure that the whole gate frame is not twisted. And there's a couple of ways you could do that. Run 2 string lines diagonally across this gate, or in this case, I'm just looking down the end of it and making sure that it's not twisted. And then I'm using shims where it's needed to adjust this gate a little bit. Now, this Amazon welder cost me $57, and for $57, it actually does work. But I used this thing for almost a whole day, and it really was just a pain because it's so slow. It's only a 110 machine, so it doesn't weld with a lot of heat, and the leads are so short, so you have to carry this thing all the way around your table, and the welds just kept getting pinholes in them. So if you're just getting started in welding and fabrication, do yourself a favor and just buy a MIG welder. Using a stick welder for shop work, for production work, is just so slow. Now, my initial thought when I was thinking about a design for this gate was a frame inside of a frame inside of a frame. And that's what I started with. But then I thought, wouldn't it be cool to put a cross at the center of this gate? But then when I started drawing this up, it actually came out to look like a doorway, like a 3D doorway, which is super cool. And so the idea here is you're looking down a hallway and the cross is at the center because Jesus is at the center and because Jesus is the doorway to heaven. If you've watched my videos before, then you know that the stuff that I build is just not that complicated. I mean, yes, technically there's a lot of knowledge that goes into it, but if you think about it, it's really just cutting things and gluing them back together. And if you look at it that way, it's really no different than what I did as a kid. I used to always do crafts as a kid, and it's just cutting pieces of paper and gluing them to other pieces of paper. I really don't think it's all that different than what I'm doing now. Or the Legos I played with as a kid. I built things out of Legos, and now I get to build things out of metal. But when I was a kid, I never got paid to play with Legos. But now I get paid to glue metal together, which is pretty cool. Now, I'm using 3/4 by 1/8 inch square tube for these inner frames, and for those diagonal connecting pieces, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a notch in those and then angle them straight away from the corner. Just like that. I cut a bunch of 3-inch tube and put that in between the frames, and that way those kind of keep everything together, so I don't have to worry about whether the spacing is right or not, because as long as those spacers stay in there, I know that my spacing is going to be really close. Now back to the childhood play. There is just something to kids being creative that has gotten lost in our society today, because almost every parent now just hands their kid a phone or an iPad, and for one, there's just a lot of bad stuff on the internet and a lot of stuff that's going to destroy children. But aside from that, it just ruins the creativity of kids. God made children, especially little boys, to go get their hands dirty and go experiment, to build things. How do you think I got started in metal fabrication? It was certainly not by sitting around on a smartphone or sitting on my TV playing video games. It's because my dad didn't buy me video games, and so I had to learn how to be creative and how to play outside and build things with my hands. I'm just lining those corner supports up so that they face straight out towards the center of the corner, and I'm leaving them long, and then I will cut them off. And now it was time to put the main gate frame up there and mark out those corner supports and then get those cut off. Now it's time for the creative design part, the cross. So I'm using some 2x1 by 1/8 inch thick rectangle tube for this cross. After I had made the notch out for the cross and gotten that tacked in there, it was time for just a lot of welding. Now, the footage of me welding this gate together is quite a bit, so if you don't like to listen to me ramble, then maybe now would be the time for you to click off the video, or just listen to me ramble. You might be wondering, because people always wonder, what does this gate cost? Now, if you stick around till the end of the video, I'm going to tell you exactly how much I would charge for this if I were doing it for a customer. But speaking of money, one question you might have if you're thinking about getting into welding is, how much do welders actually make? Do welders make good money? Yes, welders could make good money, but there's so many different variables, and I can't say you're going to make this much as a welder, because it really depends on what type of welding you do and how good you are at what you do. Now, instead of just telling you theoretically how much you could make as a welder, I'm just going to share with you what I made last year. Last year, which was my 3rd year in business, I brought in just over $132,000. That includes material and powder coat, so when you take the materials out, my profit was just a little over $85,000. Depending who you are, that number may sound like a lot, or it might not sound like much at all. Now, one thing with the income of my business, I try not to get too focused on what this month made me or last month made me, but what I like to do is go back to last year and see, did I make more money this year? And then the year before that. And as long as that's on an upward trend, then you're going to be fine. Starting a business does not mean you're going to get rich right away. Starting a business is a long process. But one thing that is going to push you farther, faster, is staying humble and being a sponge and soaking up all the information that you can. Now, after I got this gate all welded and cleaned up, it was time to work on the latch. This is just a standard Home Depot garden latch. Since that main frame is only 1.5 inches wide, and this latch is probably 2.5 inches wide or so, I'm going to go ahead and cut a piece of plate to make sure I can span the whole distance of that latch. Now, the final step to getting this gate done before powder coat and install is putting those hinges both on the gate and on the post. I'm going to go ahead and get this thing powder coated, and then we'll go ahead and get it installed. After about a week, I went ahead and picked up this gate and the post from powder coat, and then I went to Home Depot and picked up some concrete. Normally when I set posts in concrete, I use a post hole digger, but in this case, I had my dad's tractor and it already had the auger attachment on it, so I thought this would be a lot quicker than digging it by hand. Whenever you've got a tool that's going to save you some time, you might as well use it. Then I went ahead and mixed up the concrete and put this post in the hole. This post was pretty heavy, so it didn't want to stay up by itself, but I put my post hole digger in the hole right next to it, and that helped keep it upright, at least until the concrete was in the hole. And once this thing was filled to the top with concrete, then the post was able to stay by itself. One trick that I picked up from one of my customers recently is after you set posts like this, it makes it really nice if you tool this and actually make it smooth. And then another thing that you want to do here is build up that concrete a little bit and then make it so the concrete is actually sloping down away from the posts, and that way the water doesn't build up there. I'm going to let this post set overnight, and then I'll hang the gate and get the other post set. That just makes it a lot easier so I can get the placement of the second post. Now there's one more detail that I decided to add to this gate that I haven't mentioned yet, and that is I'm going to paint this cross gold. And since it's already powder coated, spray paint will work just fine over top of it. So for that, I just went ahead and masked off all around the cross and then put some golden spray paint on it. One thing that I absolutely love about my job is that I get to do so many different things. I get to do welding, I get to do fabrication, I get to do concrete, I get to do some spray paint every now and then, I get to make computer drawings, I get to talk to customers, I get to film YouTube videos, edit YouTube videos, and so much more. But it's just a really fulfilling trade, and I really love doing it. I really would have a hard time just doing one thing. Before I started my business, I was an assembly line welder, which was just really rough for me because I hate doing that kind of work. I like to be able to take my time and weld things nicely as opposed to just rushing everything and doing the same thing over and over and over again. But with my business, it's just that perfect balance. If I had too much office work to do, I'd probably get pretty tired of it. And if I had too much shop work to do, I'd probably get tired of that too. But with the balance, it makes for a very good trade. Now here's a breakdown of what this gate cost me and what I would charge if I were doing this for a customer. I had 11.25 hours, so if you multiply that by $100 an hour, that's $11.25 for shop labor. Now my materials with the posts and all the other tube was around $455. And with the markup, I'm going to make that $550. The concrete cost me $40, and with the markup, we'll put that up to $80. The powder coat cost me $268, and with the markup, we'll bump that up to $350. And I already had the hinges, but let's figure those were about $100. And finally, for the labor on the install, I had about 3 hours into it. And if I were doing this for a customer, I would charge $500, including delivery and travel. Oh, and I almost forgot. Let's add $10 in there for some spray paint and some masking tape. So that brings the grand total up to $2,715. So what do you think? Are my prices too high, too low, or just about right? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit that thumbs up button. And if you'd like to see more like this, please subscribe to the channel. And if you enjoyed this video, I think you would also really enjoy this video. Check out this railing that cost $11,000. And until next time, God bless.